Good morning and most welcome to 13:15 of the Heidegger series. I will today take a gander at the most prominent interpreter of Heidegger and Derrida, I would say, Rodolphe Gasché, a Luxembourgian scholar of class, and this is from the collected book edited by John Sallis, Reading Heidegger. At page 7 we find Rodolphe Gasché and his chapter Floundering in Determination. Though thought as well as proper life in language are especially prone to succumb to the danger of commonness, Heidegger writes in What is Called Thinking. If this is so, it is because language and thought too has a tendency to drift away into the obvious or self-evident. Into ordinary thinking and the common meanings of words. Common terms easily take the place of proper terms, of the words inhabited by language and thinking. And the common meanings of words. Common terms easily take the place of proper terms, of the words inhabited by language and thinking. Gewohnte Worte as opposed to gewöhnliche Worte. More precisely, as if driven by frenzy, common terms usurp the place of language properly inhabited and of its habitual words. Yet, says Heidegger, such floundering in commonness is not accidental, nor are we free to deprecate it. This floundering in commonness is part of the high and dangerous game and gamble in which, by the essence of language, we are the stakes. Consequently, thought cannot simply push aside current meanings of words in favor of the proper ones. It must face this floundering in its very inevitability. And in such manner that it can show that these words and thoughts are not unrelated to the words of language inhabited by language. As we will see, Heidegger conceives of the relation in question as one in which customary signification is rooted in the originary meaning of a word or thought. Yet, does this attempt to come to grips with the inevitable language slide successfully reverse its course? Or is the manner in which floundering in commonness comports with genuine thought perhaps more insidious and more complex than the possibility of retracing the original significations of common words or thoughts? seem? What if precisely the possibility of getting ahead of game of resisting the floundering in commonness would perpetuate that very same floundering, or if thought's chance of coming into its own by leading the common terms back to that proper and inhabited meaning. Would depend not only on a reproduction, but perhaps a multiplication of commonness. It is true that such multiplication of common terms and thoughts in the very process of their overcoming could be a calculated game. Yet the proliferation of commonness may also escape all strategy and no longer be accountable in terms of what has been called hitherto common, ordinary. Indeed, such a proliferation of ordinary meanings results as suggested from the very attempt to assess the same logic which rules the binary opposition of the common and the proper. Hence, the question arises as to what relation properly exists between the manifold ordinary terms, to which one must resort in order to retrace the ordinary back to the original. And the very process of derivation itself in addition, one may wish to ask, is such multiplication necessary, accidental, or neither? Perhaps one should also regard the nature of this latter as floundering precisely because it may no longer represent a simple opposite to genuine thought. If indeed successful thought does not go without it, these are among the questions on which I would like to elaborate in this paper, which I conceive of as an inquiry of sorts into the mood of being and time. However, a warning is called for at this point. I will not only engage the question alluded to from a specific angle, by concentrating on one term only, on its inescapable floundering in common meaning, and on Heidegger's inability to secure a proper meaning for it. but will also limit myself for reasons of space to the first half of being and time. Since the term I shall discuss is that of determination. Bestimmung. I will thus have to forego the exploration of these terms temporal, destinal, and historical implications. When used in philosophical discourse, by Kant, for instance, the expression Bestimmung, as Heidegger notes in the basic problems of phenomenology, is not arbitrary, beliebig, but is terminologically defined. Determinatio, the immediate source for this term in Kant is Baumgarten. Yet its history reaches back through Wolff and Leibniz to scholasticism and antiquity. Heidegger adds, in the conceptual history of determination, with which Heidegger is concerned, the term is a formal apophantic category. A determination is a predicate. of what in the grammar and general logic pertaining to assertions is called a subject. It enlarges the concept of a thing, that is, its what content, and not a thing in its empirical manifoldedness. Through determination, a thing becomes demarcated from another thing. Omnis determinatio est negatio. Spinoza wrote and thus set the framework within which the formal apophantic category of determination had to be understood. Since the 18th century, Bestimmung, which translates the Latin determinatio, has had in the technical language of philosophers writing in German. The meaning of a conclusive fixing or setting of the content of concepts by demarcating them with the help of marks. Characteristics or predicates from other concepts. Thus, wherever the notion of Bestimmung appears, in a philosophical text, it is not, as Heidegger aptly remarks, an arbitrary concept or word. And that is true as well in the text of being and time. Yet, although Heidegger's elaborations focus in that work on the formal, apophthegmatic nature of Bestimmung, he has already broadened the scope of this notion beyond its meaning. In the tradition to which I have alluded. So as to include within its horizon predication not only of the what content, of the concept of things, but also of things in their actuality, existence, or exactedness. The notion in question is thus treated as a category of epistemological realism in addition to its serving to assert the nature of essences or possible things. Undoubtedly, this extension of the scope of the notion in question responds to specific historical reasons, in particular to Heidegger's debate with Neo-Kantianism. Neo-Kantianism, I would say that is crucial for the understanding. Yet, considering the perspective of fundamental ontology that informs Heidegger's discussion of Bestimmung in being and time, the broadening of that notion may have still another and perhaps more essential purpose. A first definition of Bestimmung is given in Being and Time in chapter 13, when Heidegger proceeds to describe knowing of the world, Welterkennen, as a mode in which being in is exemplified. Knowing, he writes, is a way of determining the nature of the present at hand by observing it. Heidegger tells us here that the act of making determinate is primarily an interpretive perception, vernehmen. Constituted by addressing oneself to something as something and discussing it as such. Nota bene. Therefore, determination presupposes a deficiency in our having to do with the world concernfully. Indeed, determination is based on a fixed staring at something that is purely present at hand. Staring on an attitude towards the world. In other words, that becomes possible only if all ordinary ways of relating to the world have been blended out. Something like Bestimmung can become envisioned only if the world is encountered in such a way that entities present at hand reveal themselves purely in the way they look. At first, determination as an interpretive perception is non-propositional. However, what is perceived and made determinate can be expressed in propositions and can be retained and preserved as what has thus been asserted. In parenthesis, fixed staring is a definite key, and especially what modern science tells us about staring and fixed gaze. End of parenthesis. It is while discussing assertion as a derivative mode of interpretation, both in chapter 33 of Being and Time and in the Marburg lectures on logic. Die Frage nach der Wahrheit that Heidegger refines this definition of Bestimmung, its characteristics, and presuppositions. But especially the ontological realm in which it obtains. In the analysis of assertion, determination becomes defined as a mood of pointing out. Aufzeigung or Aufweisung. In which something present at hand is predicated of something that itself is present at hand. As assertion, determination is a mood of discovering. Entdecken of apophansis. Yet what it discovers, what it makes thematic, as Heidegger calls it in Logik, is the present at hand as present at hand. Thus, predicative or determining assertion is a constricted mood of discovery. Very important. Heidegger writes in Being and Time it is not by giving something a definite character that we first discover that which shows itself. The hammer as such, but give it such a character, our seeing gets restricted to it in the first instance, the stare, so that by this explicit restriction of our view, that which is already manifest may be made explicitly manifest in its definite character. In giving something a definite character, we must, in the first instance, take a step back when confronted with that which is already manifest. The hammer that is too heavy in setting down the subject with dim entities down to focus in that hammer there, so that by thus dimming them down we may let that which is manifest be seen in its own definite character, as a character that can be determined. End of quote. But by focusing on a thing as something present at hand, which paves the way for any access to the properties or the like, one does not only dim down or blend out the thing's nature as something ready to hand, but also veils or covers up readiness to hand. in his lectures on logic or logik, Heidegger adds that in determining, letting something be seen as merely present at hand, the proper character of being of this something withdraws giving the example of a piece of chalk he remarks that if the determination this piece of chalk is white, is made in conformity with the meaning that determination and assertion have in asserting, then this way of letting this thing be seen is possible only on the basis of a reconciled Wiederverbergens, reconciling of the piece of chalk as a with what of one's dealing. By reconciling the way we have been relating to the piece of chalk in our unthematized everyday dealings with it. And by thus purely concentrating on its presence at hand, it becomes possible to let this piece be seen from characteristics drawn from the object itself. That are themselves present at hand. Heidegger writes, in determining assertion that as what from which the determination takes place, namely white, is drawn from the given about what itself. This mode of predication in which the characteristics that let something be seen assertively are drawn from the thing itself. Is what Heidegger calls Bestimmung. Determination as assertion is constituted by communication or speaking forth of communication in which one makes assertions. Heidegger notes that it is a special case of that communication which is grasped in principle existentially. The very fact that in determining assertion, the what that is said of something is drawn from that which is present at hand. Reveals that the as structure that characterizes assertion as a derivative mode of interpretation has undergone a modification. since determining assertion becomes possible only when the ready-to-hand is veiled as ready-to-hand. So that properties or the like can come into view. The as in its function of appropriating what is understood no longer reaches out into a totality of involvements. Compared to the as of an interpretation which understands circumspectively the primordial existential hermeneutical as. The as in determining assertion has been leveled to just letting one see the present at hand. And letting one see it in a definite way. I will add there determined, defined, exact, specific, distinct, and of adding. This leveling of the primordial as of circumspective interpretation to the as with which presence as at hand is given a definite character, is the speciality of assertion. This derivative as that constitutes the structure of determining assertion is called the apophantical as. Determination, therefore, is not a primary discovering, In logik, Heidegger emphasizes that assertive determination never determines a primary and originary relation to what is. Because it is derivative on the originary as structure of circumspective understanding, and is the result of a leveling modification. It can never be made the guiding thread for the question regarding being. Determination, he concludes, is itself as well as its whole structure a derivative phenomenon. If determination is thus a restrictive mode of discovering that presupposes modified structures of understanding and a reduction of the world to the present at hand. Then what is the status of the word bestimmen? In the discourse of being and time? Indeed, Heidegger not only demonstrates the derivative character of determination as a concept and a mode of interpretation, but also continues to make use of the terms bestimmen and Bestimmung, as well as numerous words of the same root in a variety of ways. Put a pause there, Karen. I shall try to address the question regarding regarding the status of the notion of Bestimmung in being and time by suggesting that it is not merely a question of stylistic and not simply a theoretical question, but that it concerns the Stimmung, the mood and or the coherence of Heidegger's discourse. Heidegger, while discussing the leveling of primary understanding in determining assertion in his Marburg lectures on Logik, makes a distinction that may give us a lead on how to approach the question of the word bestimmen in the work of 1927. When I say this piece of chalk is white, then this assertion about something with which I am dealing is not an assertion that as such would primarily relate, as far as its content is concerned, to my dealings. If I said while writing, the chalk is too hard, then I would make an assertion within my performance. Verrichtung, within writing. This assertion, the chalk is too sandy, is not only a determination of the chalk, but at the same time an interpretation of my behavior and of not being able to behave or not being able to write correctly. In this assertion, I do not wish to determine this thing that I hold in my hand as something that has the properties of hardness or sandiness. But I wish to say it hinders me in writing. Thus, the assertion is interpretatively related to the writing activity. That is, to the primary dealings of writing itself. That is, it is assertion as interpretation of being in, as being alongside. This last cite from Heidegger from the Marburg lectures are specifically interesting. Maybe my dear colleague here, Dr. Kalle Lundahl, has some questions.
Yes, we could reflect on these two last reflections. The shark is white and the shark is too sandy. So, for instance, the last, the first we could say is it's a generalization, almost global fallacy. While the latter, the shark is too sandy, is something that relates to me personally, which is more authentic because it's close to me.
It's more to your what you do with it, how you're together with it. And this is, of course, readiness to hand more.
Absolutely.
You put it in your hand and you use it. So it is like a scale. And the disjunct, fragmented, definitive way is on the one scale, and me holding the thing, using it with skill. And that word is very important. Verrichtung. Verrichtung.
Performance.
I would say skill.
Skill. Okay.
I would say skill here. It's more helpful because skill has a ascending scale and a descending scale. How well you perform. It's a very, very important aspect. It's how well you perform it. If you sloppily pick it up, that så handen will be more in the direction of present to hand. And of course, this always varies within oneself and from different people, different situations.
Yes, very wise, why not skill? I was also thinking about the last part, where Richtung, we have that in Swedish, riktning, that is direction, I think, and it's how it relates to us personally as beings. And that shark is white, it really doesn't relate, it's far away.
It's very good, it's a very good example. And Rodolphe Gasché has this uncanny, amazing capability of picking out the things that are helpful to understand. And of course, white, yes, it is much more in the direction of present at hand. And I think of that if you ask a school child, what is a chalk? It's almost, we encourage the child to step into the present at hand and to readily, and this is very important, it is not the same temporal aspect. The present at hand comes quicker. The ready to hand is slower. And a stressed child will answer quicker, and thereby it will almost certainly, doesn't have to be, but almost certainly be present at hand. To quickly sort of, you threw the question to me and I just unthinkingly, directly, automatic, there's another thing, automatic, threw the question back. White.
So the subjective is better than the objective in this case. Subjective is the authentic thing, that is the sarkistushanti.
Yes, it's more closer to physics, it's more closer to what is quantum physics, what is real, and the other one is more in the direction of, sorry to say that, Anders, Max Tegmark and many word interpretations. They are the Stimmung themselves. So they are in that mood. They are quick. They want what they think is definiteness, determinate. I think a person like Tegmark or Hugh Everett, they perceived it to be exact. They perceived it. This is important. Heidegger doesn't agree. He says even too much present at hand is nothing. It's no Bestimmung.
Yes, I was thinking about this concept that you mentioned in the beginning of the paper, namely neo-Kantianism. And how should we define neo-Kantianism? I think it's realism, that you want to, it was the idea to go back to Kant's scientific writings. You could call it, I don't know, I'm not specialist in this field, but kind of socialism in one way, or how would you say it's?
I would say we have to go to the ready at hand here. The subject of neo-Kantism needs to be studied and not defined quickly. I think that's my advice, my humble advice. That's my humble advice. It will be helpful though. So he stops me also from making too quick judgments. His literary style stops me going too anxiously, being like the school child, raising my hand and say, "Hey teacher, it's white." He doesn't. He's excellent.
I thank you, if I may. It was really excellent. We will
Yes.
continue with Gasché in a separate lecture, I think.
Yes.
We left that page, which was it? Page
11. I will continue. So I hit the 2-hour mark here. Let's see how much I have.
128. Okay. Please
Another half
continue
an hour.
if you want.
Undoubtedly, when Heidegger in Being and Time engages the problem of Bestimmung as one that has served as the guiding thread for the question of being from Greek antiquity to Husserl's, as well as for the sciences. His conclusion that Bestimmung is a derivative phenomenon primarily relates to the subject matter under discussion. But this assertion is made as well in the process of developing arguing and writing, being and time, and thus is also, especially in consideration of what this work is all about. The question of being. A statement regarding his argumentative and writing performance. That Bestimmung is a derivative phenomenon, then comes to mean that assertive determination is an obstacle when trying to come to grips with the question of being. While Heidegger was writing being and time. Indeed, if the determining mode of assertion is not appropriate for dealing with the question of being, this mode, as well as the word Bestimmung itself, inhibits the very performance of elucidating the question of being. Yet, as we shall see, Bestimmung as a term, if not as a concept, appears throughout being and time, and thus the question arises as to the status and function of this term in the production of Heidegger's work. Why must Heidegger continue to use the philosophical language of Bestimmung? How do the uses of that term relate to what he himself has established about its notion? And how does Heidegger's own explicit or implicit account of his continued use of the term do justice to its manifold appearances or occurrences in being and time? These are among the questions that I would like to touch upon. Heidegger, in Being and Time, but elsewhere as well, makes frequent and seemingly innocent use of the term bestimmen, bestimmt, or Bestimmung in their common meaning of to define, to characterize, to qualified. Certainly, on repeated occasions, he makes an arbitrary use of it. He employs it as well in the sense of certain specific or determined. For instance, when he writes, these others, moreover, are not definite, bestimmte others, and at times bestimmt has the meaning of intended or destined for, as when we read that along with the equipment to be found when one is at work, those others for whom the work is destined, bestimmt, are encountered too. In all these cases, the term is used in a casual, ordinary way. A definitely more technical use of Bestimmung occurs in Heidegger's text when the task of phenomenological description or interpretation becomes characterized as one of determining the structures of its objects. In this latter case, Bestimmung means in der Bestimmtheit bringen. to give definiteness to, or to raise to a conceptual level the phenomenal content of what has been disclosed. Although Dasein, the object of the phenomenological analysis of being and time, is thoroughly different from objects present at hand. Heidegger continues to characterize his whole investigation as an existentiale Bestimmung. As an attempt to exhibit the Grundbestimmung des Daseins. Yet even more questionable is a third type of reference to the concept of determination. The meaning of being its structures are said to lie beyond every entity and every possible character. Which an entity may possess. Hence, the meaning of being demands that it be conceived in a way of its own, essentially contrasting with the concepts in which entities acquire their determinate signification. But Heidegger does not only characterize phenomenology as the Bestimmungsart of being. Being itself is to be made determinate according to the essential determinative structures for the character of its being. At stake in such an analysis is being's originary Sinnbestimmtheit. Its temporal determinateness. Which has to be made thematic in an overcoming of the very indefiniteness in which vague and average understanding holds being. By means of a return to those primordial experiences in which we received our first way of determining the nature of being. Bestimmungen des Seins. One may perhaps wish to object here that this use of the notion and word Bestimmung with reference to what the analytic of Dasein is to achieve, and to being itself. It is not to be taken literary. That the term is used between quotation marks, so to speak. Yet although in Logik Heidegger had clearly stated that being is not an object for any possible Bestimmung. He does not make the slightest effort in being and time to counter any misunderstandings that could result from his talk about Seinsbestimmung and Seinsbestimmungen. as opposed to his hyphenation of the word Bestimmung with a differentiation. In What is das? Die Philosophie, for instance. Supposing that in the context of the question of being, the notion of determination should have another, more originary signification than its current and metaphysical use. It never becomes distinguished from its metaphysical double, its twin. Why this neglect in a work that prides itself on reaching beyond the established philosophical and scientific distinctions, even at the price of neologisms. In determination, one recalls something present at hand is characterized in terms of properties drawn from this something itself. It is a mode of assertion that lets something be seen from itself. Is Heidegger's neglect to attend to the specific meaning that determination ought to have when used with reference to being, perhaps rooted in an unresolved problem regarding the phenomenological characterization of what shows itself by itself. Being, first and foremost, on the one hand, and on the other, the letting be seen of what is present at hand by means of determinations drawn exclusively from that which is given in such a manner has Heidegger indeed fully clarified in Being and Time the relation between the wealth of the demarcating traits that come into view when that which shows itself to a phenomenological glance is allowed to show itself by itself, and the abundance of things which can be discovered by simply characterizing them. Ein neuer Reichtum, des in ein reinen, bestimmten, entdeckbaren. In the theoretical glance by which the world becomes dimmed down to the uniformity of what is present at hand. In any case, the very fact that Heidegger has relegated the concept of determination to the derivative domain of the present at hand and to a mode of letting be seen in terms of characteristic properties drawn from the thing itself requires that the improper reference to this concept in Being and Time has somehow accounted for. And here in the first paragraph of page 13 in John Sallis' collection work, I will stop and continue at a future lecture. I say thank you very much and have a most pleasant morning or afternoon. It's exactly noon. Bye bye.